Hi, this is Savannah, and welcome to my second ZBrush tutorial, Part A. In this series of tutorials, we'll be discussing the various options available to you within ZBrush to help you creating 3D art. Through primitives, Z-spheres, shadowbox, dynamesh, and objects, which are models that you created within another program and wish to load and sculpt in ZBrush. The first one is the 3D primitives. Go to our tool menu and click on any of these icons within your tool menu to bring up your tool window. As you can see here, it says 3D meshes. All of these objects are primitives, save for the Z-sphere. The first one that we're going to start with is the plane 3D. Click on the primitive that you wish to select and click and hold the Shift key on your canvas and draw out your plane. The reason why we hold the Shift key is very difficult without the Shift key to keeping your plane straight. Again, click anywhere on your canvas, drag, hold down the Shift key, and let go both of the key and your cursor to drop it onto the canvas. Now hit the Edit mode, or T, on your keyboard. That brings your plane into Edit mode. In Edit mode, when you're dealing with a primitive, it is not necessarily the best idea to start sculpting on a 3D primitive at this point. But there are options in which you can change the look of your primitive before you make it into a 3D object. The first thing we're going to do is click on Polyframe. Now you can see your poly layout on the plane. Now we're going to go back down to our tool menu and go to the subpalette. It's called Initialize. As you can see here, there are several sliders for the plane tool to change the look and the poly count of your plane. Each 3D primitive has different options that are available per tool. Here you can see what is called the H radius. H radius does, if you were to slide it down, as you can see, it gets thinner and longer. The V radius makes it shorter and thinner. The H divide changes the polygon on the horizontal level. As you can see, with it only down to 2, the only lines left are on the horizontal level. If you were to use the V divide, that's for the vertical side. And as you can see, turned all the way down, leaves the vertical lines. If you were to turn both of these to 3 on a 3D plane, as you can see, there are now 4 polygons. Also, only active 9 points. This is the lowest, or second to lowest, that it can go. If you were to turn both of these to 2, it is 1 solid polygon. The points are represented this way. As you can see, when you take your cursor over any point, it turns red or has a red dot. There are 9 of them total. 3, 3, and 3. Once you have your plane initialized the way you'd like it, hit the Make Polymesh 3D. This will create and load onto your canvas a 3D editable plane. Now we can edit by adding geometry and sculpting to the plane. The other ones that I'd like to show you is a cylinder 3D. If you click on any of these tools and click on the cylinder 3D while another tool is in edit mode, it automatically uploads that cylinder or that tool in the place of your last selected tool. Now, as you can see, we have a cylinder. Rotate it around so that you can see and go to the initialize menu. As you can see, there's quite a few more options within the initialize for the cylinder than there was for the plane. The X size is each side of the plane or the cylinder. The Y size is for the front and the back. And the Z size is for the top and bottom. Either make it shorter or taller. Let's turn these to 20 for the X and Y and leave the Z size at 100. As you can see now, you have a thin but long cylinder. The H divide and the V divide is exactly the same deal as the 3D plane. This is 32 and this 43. You also have a slider called taper top. And as you can see, the top of your cylinder will taper into a cone-like shape. You can use this for horns and many other different styles. You also have another one called inner radius. What the inner radius does is, as you can see, there's a hole right in the center on top and bottom of your cylinder. If you were to turn the inner radius up, as you can see, there's polygons that open up and create a tube. One of the other things that I'd like to notice is when changing your polygon count within any primitive, you want to keep your polygons at a fairly square look to them instead of rectangular. That will help to keep your cylinder from stretching out. One of the other things that you can do with a cylinder and many of the 3D primitives within ZBrush is if you go to your masking subpalette and you were to click Mask All, go down to where it says Row, Column, and Grid. Click on Grid. As you can see, it gave a checker mark like mask to your 3D primitive. To clear a mask, hit your Command or Control key and drag out a square across any part of your blank canvas. Also, using the Command or Control key to drag out a square across your 3D primitive or tool within the canvas, and it will mask all of it, as you can see there. One of the things with this is the select count. This will unmask certain rows of polygons. For example, a row is a group of polygons going straight across. The skip will mask or leave those rows or columns masked. Let's turn back on our mask. Turn this down to 2 and 2. If we hit row, as you can see, there are 2 rows of polygons unmasked and 2 rows of them masked. We'll hit the Mask All button again and now hit column. As you can see, it is masked 2 by 2 on the columns. Once you have got a mask on your primitive, you can go up to the Deformation subpalette, and using these various deform sliders, you can change the look, the initial look of your primitive. For an example, if I were to use the inflate, as you can see, all of the primitive that was not masked inflated and didn't inflate the parts that were masked. If you were to deselect your view mask here, just so that we could see it better, your mask is still on. You can see what your primitive looks like now. You can put back on your mask at any point. If you clear the mask, it will remove your mask entirely. This is just to turn off or on the view of the mask. For an example, if I were to turn off view mask and then inflate, as you can see, it inflates or deflates, leaving the masked areas untouched. You can use many different things to create different looks to your primitive. Also, within the sliders is X, Y, and Z. Also, turn these off to only change the X or the Y or the Z. Click on the Z and turn on the Y. Now, as you can see, it only stretches out the polygons on the Y direction. You can create many different 3D primitives using the mask and the deformation. Once you're done, clear your mask either by dragging with the Command key or Control key across the empty place of your canvas, or hit clear. Once you're ready to make it into a 3D object, hit Make Polymesh 3D. Well, I hope you enjoyed the primitive tutorial, Part A, and happy ZBrushing.